Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. This is your Tuesday update premium video. Hopefully, you enjoyed the content. This one is going to be on the addition of inflation data to the dashboard. Now, we have talked at length over the last half year or so about inflation and how it's not a good thing for risk on assets, right? And this includes Bitcoin, of course, and I know people would prefer for Bitcoin not to be a risk on asset, especially when we're in a risk off time. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And honestly, considering we spend most of our time in risk on territory, ultimately it's probably a better thing that Bitcoin is a risk on asset, rather than something that only tends to move in risk off times. So in order to find the inflation data, if you go over to charts and you just search inflation, you can find inflation and CPI. Okay, so you click on that and it'll automatically load the S&P 500, the blue line, and then it'll load the inflation. Okay, now inflation is, it varies based on geography, right? I mean, like inflation that we might be experiencing in the United States could be very different from what you might experience in parts of Europe or in parts of Asia. Okay, so because of that, you can actually sort by country. Okay, so you can look at the Euro area, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Japan, Italy, France, Germany, Canada, New Zealand. Okay, these are the ones we have right now, Australia and Russia. So we have a couple more. So you can quickly look at what inflation looks like in these various places, and hopefully it'll appeal to people who are who live in places besides the United States. But obviously the default is the U.S. That's where I live. I think that's where a lot of people that follow me live. But it is very prevalent, of course, to these markets that we follow. The other thing is that you can also look at it in the context of various stocks and indices like the S&P, the Nasdaq 100, the Dow Jones, Tesla, Apple, etc. You can also look at it in the context of the US dollar currency index, DXY, which we've spoken about quite a bit. But furthermore, you can also switch this and overlay it with things like Bitcoin. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and this is what we've been talking about for quite some time. And it's look at Bitcoin's price history, right, compared to all the inflation data that we have. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that Bitcoin has never been through an inflationary period like we've seen in the 80s, or let's say like the 70s and early 80s, like we saw back in the 40s. We just never have experienced that. Like Bitcoin has never experienced that before. And what we could do is we could zoom in just to sort of this localized region and look at inflation and see that really, inflation year over year has just simply not even been close to this high since Bitcoin's been around. You can see it did go up to around a little less than 4% once upon a time, but that was in Bitcoin's early part of its history. Now inflation is all the way up at about 8.6% or so. So Bitcoin is certainly struggling right now, and this is one of the things we've spoken about. And I will remind people about some of the common things that we have, that we're sort of operating under right now. But I do want people to know that this does exist for you to use. One thing that might be useful is to go look to see how gold performs in high inflationary periods. Of course, right now it doesn't look like we have the history for gold all the way back. So perhaps we'll try to get that one. Fixed. But you can at least toggle between various things and sort of just see how these things compare. It does look like at least we have silver data going back further, so you can see that silver was doing relatively well back when inflation was pretty high once upon a time. But regardless, I do think it's important for people to consider that inflation will continue to wreak havoc on risk on markets. Okay, and this is something I've said a lot, and it could probably help explain to people why I haven't said like this is the time to go all in or stuff like that, because under normal circumstances, maybe I'd be a bit more aggressive. But one of the things that we identified back in January, right, and I still think is prevalent today, is this cash is king. And yes, inflation it's here and it sucks for everyone. But the truth is as long as it sticks around, we should not expect, right? We should not expect these markets to look better in a sustained way. Okay, I mean look at high inflation back over here. Again, it wasn't until inflation peaked that the S&P bottomed. It's a really important thing to really hammer home, right? It wasn't until inflation peaked that the S&P bottomed, and you can even see this sort of local peak in inflation, and it was right around there where the S&P bottomed as well. Okay, now once we had this first major peak, the second major peak, you can see that the S&P sort of ignored. And actually something very similar happened in the 40s as well. So you sort of look at these like double peaks, right? We had the 40 double peaks, 40s double peak, 70s double peak. Look what happened in the 40s. It was on that first peak in inflation that the S&P bottomed. The second peak, the S&P didn't really care nearly as much on the second one. Okay, it's just something I think it's worthwhile to consider. And really, with inflation running sky high, it reminds us the three main things that I keep saying for this summer, right? Cash is king. So stacking cash, it still takes priority. I have said that I've softened up a little bit on that stance over the last 6 months and more so recently. But even with that, slight softening of the stance, I still think it is the best strategy, right? I do think that it beats everything else right now. And really, what I want you to do is I want you to sort of imagine a year from now what these markets are going to look like. Okay, likely you're going to have a lot of people that don't care about crypto anymore. Okay, it's just likely going to be the case in 1 year. So 12 months from now, you're likely going to have a lot of people that don't care about crypto anymore. That's likely going to be the time to accumulate altcoins. I'm telling you ahead of time because I still get emails and messages from people asking me, is it time to buy altcoins? I don't think so, right? I really don't. And not only am I saying that because inflation's still going up, we can't fight the Fed here. There's no reason to fight the Fed. First of all, in terms of, being risky or what are risky assets versus what are not, especially during these current times, commodities are doing fairly well. I would say things like gold and silver are not super risky right now. I think they're going to mostly act as like a store of value. I don't think you're going to get rich on them, right? But I think they're going to hold their value better than cryptocurrencies, and at least for right now. And then of course, you have stocks, right? You have equities, but equities very much are risk on assets. And you have crypto, which is even more risky than stocks. But then in crypto, you have Bitcoin, which is the safest of them all. And then you have ETH, which is probably next in line. And then you have everything else, which is incredibly risky. So again, when you're living in a very inflationary time and you have all these altcoins that have gone up tremendously over the last, several years. I mean, I know they've dropped down a lot recently, but the truth is a lot of people don't understand how far altcoins can drop in a bear market. They just simply do not know, or they don't care to know. And I'm here to tell you again, they can drop a lot further than you think. I've been stuck holding altcoin bags before, heavy bags in prior bear markets, and I wish they had been lighter bags, and that's why earlier this year we said get altcoin light. And some people today were even asking, they're like, is it too late to convert alts to Bitcoin? In a bear market, it's never too late. I mean, I don't really think it's too late if you still haven't, but recognize that a lot of these alt Bitcoin pairs are just in macro downtrends against Bitcoin, and try not to get caught up so much in local bounces. This is not, there's too much angst in the market, and there's just not enough innovation. We don't have the right macro conditions, right? I mean, the Fed is raising interest rates into a slowing economy, so we're likely heading into a recession, or we're already in one. How is that good for alts, right? It's simply not. And really, it's going to take more innovation in the crypto space. In addition to needing more innovation, we're going to simply need the Fed to pivot. I mean, and they're not going to pivot until inflation stops going up. So I think that the strategy, while it's boring, while it doesn't necessarily lead you to, the gains that you want to see, like on a month to month basis, like maybe in 2021 you were used to seeing just your portfolio go up each and every day. Right now, it is a very important time, like I do think, for crypto investors. The reason is not because there's a lot of cryptocurrencies you should be throwing money in right now. That's not the reason. The reason is because right now you have the opportunity to save cash to buy those assets after they've been absolutely pummeled, like absolutely destroyed, not only on their USD pairs, but also their Bitcoin pairs. My biggest mistake in prior bear markets was not saving enough and coming in too soon on altcoins. That was my biggest mistake in 2018, to some extent, in 2014 to an even more extent. In 2014, by the time we hit bottom, I had no cash left to put in. But in 2018, I came into altcoins about 4 months too early, maybe 3 to 4 months too early, and it cost me big time. Okay, because I thought I was coming in at a good time, and then alt still dropped another 80 to 85%. I know it seems crazy. I know a lot of people don't believe it can happen, but it can. It can happen. So please, when we talk about these markets, this phase is actually very important because, right, and it's the same thing when you look at prior recessions, which again, there's no confirmation we're in one yet, but I mean we certainly could be. It's the people that stacked cash, right, that saved, that had the capital to buy at the bottom, right, to buy during the latter part of the recession. It was those people that saved. It's not going to be the people that YOLO alts on every rally down, right, or buy every dip down. It's not going to give you strength at the bottom of the bear market. It's just simply not. And I do hope that you can at least look past some of these local bounces by altcoins. I mean, you can see. I mean, one of the ones we talked about recently was the Sol Bitcoin pair, Solana, and I even said, when it was over here, just maybe a little less than 20,000 satoshis or so. So look, I think it's probably a good time to trade back if you still have it, right? I'm not saying that. I mean, first of all, I got out of Solana a while back, but these sort of bounces back up give you an opportunity to trade it back to Bitcoin, right? I mean, again, they're likely going to go down against the US dollar, but they're almost certainly going to go down against Bitcoin. One thing you can do that should be helpful, look at it on a linear scale, right? I mean, look at this. It's still, to me, this still has a ways to go down, right? I don't see the Sol Bitcoin pair doing anything like that, right? I think it's more likely gonna continue down like this, and then it'll try to find some bottom. But and I mean, I know if you hold Solana, you're not gonna like it. This thing could easily drop another 80%. Like the Sol Bitcoin pair could drop another 80% easily over the next 6 months. Okay, so and maybe longer, maybe 6 to 12 months, but I do think it's coming. You can basically rinse and repeat this same type of analysis for most altcoins. I'm trying to warn you, right? I sounding the alarm once again that these altcoins are likely going to continue down against Bitcoin over the next 6 to 12 months. And if you can hold up in Bitcoin and cash until then, you are going to come out leagues ahead. Because not only will you have saved yourself from buying every altcoin dip in the bear market, you will be able to buy in the accumulation phase of altcoins before the next bull market, right? When no one cares. The problem right now that I see is that too many people care. Honestly, like it is what it is. And if you go say like the indicator dashboard and you look at the social risk, it is coming down, but this is going to take some time to come all the way back down. And some people say, well, you have to include the fact that there's going to be more people interested from one cycle to another. That is included in the metric, right? It's already included in that. So even though there are going to be more people from one cycle to another, it's already included into it. And I still think social risk needs to go down. The truth is channels like mine, YouTube channels like mine, where that is very, very quantitative focused. I mean, honestly, I have no business getting 60,000 views or 100,000 views on videos in a bear market, right? I mean, and the fact that we're still seeing that is clear evidence that too many people are interested right now, and it's just going to take some time for us to really get through this phase. And really, I think one of the reasons the social risk is holding on is because altcoins still haven't really made that, that move down against Bitcoin yet. I mean, they've made it. I mean, here's ADA Bitcoin. I mean, and listen, I mean, I can talk about altcoins I like, and I can talk about altcoins I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of Solana. I do like ADA. I mean, I like Ethereum more, and I like Bitcoin more than Ethereum. But, you look at these charts, and I can't help but think that this is ultimately going to be heading back down this way, right? I mean, eventually, right? Eventually. Even though I like ADA, I mean, I like ADA, but it's not going to, just because I like it, it's not going to stop it from coming back down this way, which I ultimately think is where it's going. Note that when it made this move, this was the Bitcoin bear market, and this was sort of like a mini Bitcoin bull market over here. But both the Bitcoin bear market and bull market contributed to the ADA Bitcoin pair going down. And so what I think is important to recognize is the Bitcoin dominance. And I know it's not as high as I really want it to be right now. But if anything, I think what it's doing is it's sort of giving a little retest of maybe its 20-week SMA. I think it's in the process of likely putting in a higher low. Okay. I think that this move here gave you a taste of what's coming. I think that's what happened. I think that's what's going on. I think this move here by the Bitcoin dominance gave you a very brief taste of what is going to come over the next 3 to 6 months. Okay. And when this thing turns back around, okay, when the Bitcoin dominance turns back around, and I do think it will, I'm willing to die on that hill. I think that the Bitcoin dominance is going to go up, right? When this starts going back up, whether it has to go a bit lower first, I don't know. But whenever it starts to go back up, I don't think it's taking any prisoners this time. Okay, I really don't. I think I think there's a good chance that Bitcoin might be somewhat range bound for a bit, between 15K to 25K, something like that. And you could see alts still lose a lot of value against Bitcoin, which will likely lead to the Bitcoin dominance going up a lot. Okay. And one of the reasons it's pulled back recently is also because of stable coins, but that's not the only reason. I mean, like, it's sort of like a cop-out answer if I just point to stable coins as the reason. I'm not going to do that. Just to say like, oh well, I was right if you don't include stable coins. I'm not actually still. I mean, even if you don't include stable coins, you can still see there's been a pullback, not as drastic, but again, I think it's just a higher low, and we don't expect things to go up monotonically by any stretch of the imagination. And so, if anything, this surge by alt Bitcoin pairs, if anything, I think it's an opportunity to take it back to Bitcoin if you haven't already. Okay. I think the next, I think as we continue on with this, rate hiking schedule by the Fed, it's not going to make things any easier in the short term, especially on the altcoin market. And just being rather in the safety of Bitcoin is likely going to be a lot better. But also, remember, cash is king. So if you need to take some to cash, I think that's fine as long as you're growing your cash position. So my cash position right now is about 47, 48%, something like that. I still think it's worthwhile to grow because I still think it slightly edges out everything else. The only thing I'm not gonna say it's necessarily better than I'm not going to strongly say that it's necessarily better than buying Bitcoin, but I do think that it is probably the winning strategy. Like if you were to look back in say 6 months, or say 6 to 12 months or something, I think that just saving and preparing for the next accumulation phase makes sense. And I think Bitcoin is the only one that is in a more convincing accumulation phase. And even then, it's still likely not done with its bear market. But if the reason I say that is because if you look at Bitcoin and you look at things like the regression band, which by the way, we still probably need to refit probably within about 4 months or so, we'll refit it. It'll slightly vary it. But when you look at stuff like this, you can see, I mean, Bitcoin's already back in that regression band, right? But the problem is that things like Ethereum, they're not. And they still have a ways to go down. And I think that when you look at this chart and you see that Ethereum still needs to go down another 50% just to get basically to the same point that Bitcoin is on its own regression chart, it really makes sense why the Ether Bitcoin pair is likely going to go down. Okay? I mean, if Bitcoin USD were to stay constant, I mean, if Ether, Bitcoin, I mean, were to drop 50%, you're talking about a point less than a 0.03 Ether Bitcoin valuation to potentially get back to that level. Now, Bitcoin will likely also go down if Ethereum goes down to $600, but it is something to consider. And listen, I mean, I don't make these videos with any sense of joy or anything. I don't want to see people lose money, but what I want people to do is I want people to preserve their money. All right, 2022, it's the time for preserving capital. This is the time to preserve as much capital as you can because I think next year, really, I'm excited for next year. I think next year is going to be a great accumulation phase on altcoins. Okay, especially as we get to maybe like the middle part of the year. We know that in mid 2019, that's when alt Bitcoin pairs bottomed. Okay, so it was 1 year, it was the year after the bear market. It was about halfway through the year. That's where alt Bitcoin pairs bottomed. So your goal right now, right, simply put, on the crypto space is stat cash, right? If you want to pick something up, I think Bitcoin is fine. I'm not going to tell you not to buy Bitcoin. I think it's fine. There's going to be some bounces here and there, and it'll help you. It'll probably help keep your FOMO down some, right? Because then if Bitcoin has a bounce back to 30K, at least you bought some, right? At least you had some. But with all that said, I want people to remember that inflation is here to stay for a while, and the Fed will not pivot more than likely until they either break something or inflation comes back down. And inflation is not coming down yet, right? It's not coming down yet, and so there's no reason to assume that the bear market is over, and especially the altcoin bear market, and especially the alt Bitcoin bear market, the bear market of alts against Bitcoin. So I want to be clear. You know, I know it's not usually great to be deterministic, but I do think a lot of these alts have a lot further to drop against Bitcoin than we've currently seen. I mean, even the AVAX Bitcoin pair. I sold my AVAX a while ago, and I told you guys that I did. I sold some to Bitcoin and some to cash, but I mean, again, you could easily see this thing drop another 80%. I know it sounds crazy, right? I know it sounds crazy, but it's something you need to consider when talking about a Bitcoin bear market and when thinking about just a recession potentially and everything that comes with it. So with all that said, one question I commonly get is there going to be a relief rally? I know everyone's been calling for a relief rally, and I've even speculated on relief rallies, and none of them have really manifested, right? I mean, really, hasn't really been much of a relief rally on Bitcoin in quite a long period of time. Again, I'm not going to call for a relief rally every single week, because I mean, clearly we're in a bear market. They're going to come at some point, and perhaps it'll come whenever the Nasdaq hits the 200 week. We know that that's where we've seen some relief rallies before in the financial crisis. And in the dot-com bust, we saw relief rallies off the 200-week SMA. We haven't quite hit it yet, but we've gotten relatively close. So that is something to consider. What I'd like to see is the Bitcoin dominance go up a lot. And it is somewhat, I mean, honestly, it is a little bit confusing to me why it isn't a lot higher than it already is, because to me it seems so obvious that altcoins are an incredibly dangerous play at this point. But I guess a lot of market participants disagree with me, and they're trying to make the statement that no, alts aren't as risky, and the Bitcoin dominance might not need to go to those higher levels. But I'm still somewhat convinced that the dominance will head higher. I think we got a taste of it just a few weeks ago, and the next time it goes up, it's not taking any prisoners, and the alt Bitcoin pairs are going to drop precipitously. They're going to drop quite a lot, I think, whenever this Bitcoin dominance starts to turn back around, which I do think is coming sooner rather than later. I mean, I don't think this downtrend is going to last too much longer before we start to make a turn back the other direction, and it might start slowly, and then start to pick up some pace as we get into the in the middle part of the third quarter and whatnot. But hopefully all that makes sense. We'll check on a couple other charts. The current undervaluation on the asset class as a whole right now is 49%. Remember, historical bottoms occur tend to be, especially, I mean, if we hit the lower green line, that tends to be about a 65 to 70% undervaluation. So I'm looking for that to be a bit more optimistic. On the risk chart for Bitcoin, you can see that it's currently at 0.16 risk. If you have a 2 to 3 year outlook, DCAing here I think is fine. Okay, if you're like me and you have gotten a little bit of Bitcoin recently, you picked up some, but you also want to keep stacking cash until the macro looks better, then I think it's fine to do that too. I think it's fine to have, occasionally pick up some Bitcoin, keep stacking cash, right? You're likely going to have plenty of time to accumulate, and hopefully, I mean, I do hope that eventually we make it to the lower risk bands. Remember, the on-chain risk is now actually below 0.1. Historically, we do tend to go all the way down basically zero. Okay, and we're still holding up at right around 0.1 or so. So we like to see that get closer to zero. I would argue that Bitcoin USD is much closer to a bottom than everything else in the crypto space, or most things. Okay, so do remember that. The Let's see, the running 1-year ROI is currently coming in around 0.588. Hopefully, we'll see that come back down here by closer to the end of the year. Might be a more convincing cycle bottom. And one thing to check in on is ROI after cycle peak, and just look at the green line. That's where Bitcoin is, and compare to prior bear markets and say, look, I mean, everyone's always saying this time's different. And, maybe this time is different if we go into a longer recession. But even if it is different, it's not different yet. And I mean, Bitcoin is still basically where it has been in prior bear markets. It's even slightly a little bit worse. But I mean, even during, one of the bear markets, during the last bear market, this is more or less where we were at this point. So, I look at these types of charts and I say there's no reason that we can't go lower, right? Look at Ethereum's bear market comparison. There's no reason we can't go lower. Look at Cardano's. Still seems to me like these things have a little bit of bleeding to do. And I do think it would be somewhat difficult for me to not buy ETH if we were to go down that, another 50%. So like Ether had one 50% correction here, from 48 to 2400, and then another 2400 to 1200 drop, another 50% correction. If we get one more 50% correction, you're talking about a $600 ETH. It'd be very hard for me not to buy at that point. That's sort of like where the regression bands, that fair value comes into play, fits in the non-bubble data. So I'm hoping that we do. I mean, I would honestly like for us to go back to these levels because I do think it'll set up crazy opportunities for the next bull market. So let's suppose that Ethereum does something like this and ultimately makes it down here. This is, I think, the Goldilocks sort of accumulation zone, the accumulation zone of a lifetime, if you will, heading into the next bull market. Okay, that's what I think. I think we have plenty of time, honestly. Crypto's not going anywhere, not in a sustained way, in my opinion, not in the next few months. So hopefully I'm not just I'm not trying to just spread FUD or anything. I just want people to sort of recognize that I have experienced the pain of multiple bear markets in crypto, and my biggest mistake was always coming in too early on altcoins. It was always my biggest mistake was coming in too early, and I feel like we can look at these charts and say, look, you don't want to be that person that comes in too early. Just be patient, stack cash. If you want to buy anything, I think buy Bitcoin. And other than that, I think it's a fairly clear-cut strategy, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, I don't think it requires too much effort right now to be successful in terms of where your strategy should be. It's not like you have to figure out 20 different altcoins to buy from. It's just don't buy any of them is what I'm doing, right? Not financial advice, but that's what I'm doing, right? Just not buying any of them and hoping that they bleed. You look at the does it bleed chart, and we switch this one over to Bitcoin, and we go look at some other cryptocurrencies. You can see that over the last 6 months, they have been bleeding against Bitcoin. Yes, they've seen a local bounce, and even over the last 3 months and 1 month, they've been bleeding against Bitcoin. They've had a local bounce this week. We're gonna have that. Like, that's the Ether. You look at BNB, it's one of the few that is sort of doing okay. It's also one of the few that did okay in 2018, and it had this sort of spike in mid 2018, and then it came back down. So this is probably one to watch. If it comes back down for the second half of the year and sort of dips going into the end of the year, that might be one to pick up, actually. But that's one to look at. ADA, look, I mean, it's still, again, it's down on a lot of time frames, maybe up locally a little bit, but still, it's still in a macro downtrend against Bitcoin. Solana, same thing, right? I mean, you can look at a lot of this stuff and see that they are in macro downtrends, and they will likely continue their macro downtrends for a while. Okay. Why don't we go check in on the dollar, because this is one of the useful charts. Remember, dollar in an uptrend, Bitcoin risk goes down. We see that, right? Dollar's in an uptrend, Bitcoin risk is going down. So that'll likely continue to play out. Not monotonically, of course, right? Nothing goes straight down. You should expect bounces I would love a bounce. I mean, I really would. I think it would be great because I think it would give a chance to see if Bitcoin dominance is going to go up. And this is something we talked about for a while. Whenever we do get a relief rally, the telltale sign is, will the dominance go up with it or does it not? If it doesn't go up with it, then I will be extremely disappointed. But that will be something to watch, is if Bitcoin can get a bounce, say in the third quarter or something, will the dominance sort of go up? And actually, you can see over here in 2018 in the third quarter in July and August, the dominance went up a lot, and even going into middle of September. So that's sort of where we're heading. We're about to start the third quarter of the year, and we'll take it one step at a time. I mean, I know saying things like, wait until 2023 to buy altcoins or something, or that's at least what I'm doing, right? I know that sounds like forever, but it's really not that far off, right? Like 2023 is literally starts in like 6 months, right? It's not. I mean, we're already halfway through 2022. We need to get through the second half of it, and then I think we can seriously start talking about altcoin accumulation. Until then, I would just assume most alts are going to underperform Bitcoin. Pick up some Bitcoin, stack some cash, enjoy your summer. Leave a comment down below if you guys have any questions. I'll see you next time. Bye.